Emily waited for her husband to come home. It was already 10 p.m., and Michael was still not back. Her best friend, Jessica, who had been her confidant since school, was visiting. "Does he often stay out this late?" Jessica asked with a hint of concern. "Lately, yes, very often," Emily admitted, her voice tinged with worry. "Have you asked him why and where he goes?" "Of course I have. He says there's just a lot of work. He used to at least take a day off during the week, but now it's like he never stops. Sometimes he comes home after midnight." "Well, theoretically, he could be really busy. His business is growing, after all. But doesn't he have other people working for him? Can't they take turns staying late?" "I've told him that," Emily sighed. "He insists that as the owner, he should be the last to leave." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "That's an odd stance. Why does he even need a wife then?" "Good question," Emily muttered, her frustration evident. "We haven't had any intimacy in weeks. Maybe last month." "He doesn't sleep with you?" Jessica was shocked. "No, he comes home exhausted and just goes straight to bed." "Maybe there's another reason he's coming home so late, another woman." Emily frowned at her friend. The thought had crossed her mind more than once, but she hadn't found any signs of infidelity. And Michael always came home looking so worn out, it was hard to imagine he'd been out on a date. "Do you think I haven't thought of that?" Emily snapped. "But there's no evidence. He comes home too tired to have been with someone else." Jessica didn't back down. "Then what's really going on? If it's not work and not another woman, what could it be?" "I don't know, Jess. I really don't," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I even suggested we take a week off to go somewhere and relax, but he got so angry, said we can't afford to take time off, that we need to work while we can." "How long have you been married?" Jessica asked after a pause. 5 years this July," Emily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I really want a child, Jess. But how can I even think about that when I barely see my husband?" Jessica looked at her friend sympathetically. "You need to tell Michael how you feel." "I've tried more than once. He says he's not against it, but it just hasn't happened yet." "Well, you should remind him that making babies involves sleeping with his wife," Jessica joked, trying to lighten the mood. Emily managed a weak smile. "It's not funny. Everything's been so off between us lately." "Maybe it's just a rough patch," Jessica offered, though she didn't sound convinced. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Michael was home. He was slightly tipsy, and Emily's irritation flared. "What's the occasion?" she asked, barely concealing her annoyance. "My friend went missing," Michael said, his voice unsteady. "I'm upset, so I had a few drinks. I have the right, don't I?" "Missing? What do you mean missing?" Emily's irritation turned to confusion. "He was supposed to head home from work, but never made it," Michael explained. "Did you call him? Check where he might be?" Emily asked, concerned. "I did, but his phone's off. I was worried, so I called the police, but they said it's too early to start searching. Maybe he just wandered off somewhere." "Well, they're right. By law, they don't search for adults right away unless they're in immediate danger," Emily agreed, trying to rationalize the situation. "Are you going to eat?" she asked, changing the subject. "No, I'm going to bed," Michael replied curtly, heading upstairs. Emily's frustration boiled over. As usual, she muttered under her breath, sparking an argument. "What do you mean, as usual? Do I have friends going missing every day?" Michael snapped, turning on her. "No, but you come home exhausted and late more often than not. So forgive me for not being surprised," Emily shot back. Michael's anger grew. "I'm sick of your nagging. Can't you just be a supportive wife for once, instead of always trying to pick a fight?" His aggression frightened Emily, especially as he loomed over her, his presence more intimidating than ever. Jessica, sensing the tension, stepped in. "Back off, Michael. If you can't keep it together, I'll step in, and I won't be polite about it." Michael glared at Jessica, his irritation palpable. He had never liked her, finding her meddlesome and self-righteous. Knowing better than to escalate the situation with her around, he stormed off to the bathroom without another word. Emily and Jessica exchanged worried glances. "I swear, sometimes it feels like he's two different people," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "I think it's time you did something about it," Jessica said firmly. "But what?" Emily replied, her voice filled with despair. Michael emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, still seething. He didn't speak to Emily, just brushed past her and went to the bed. Emily stayed in the kitchen, too afraid to even make a sound, fearing she might provoke him further. Eventually, Michael fell asleep. Emily texted Jessica, who advised her to sleep in the guest room for the night. But Emily couldn't sleep. She stayed up until the early hours, haunted by thoughts of what might be going on. The next morning, Michael was as moody as ever, and Emily barely managed to ask if he wanted breakfast. "Just coffee," he muttered, not even looking at her. After a few sips, he left the house without another word. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her when he left. She immediately called Jessica. "Jess, I'm scared of him, really scared. There's this energy around him, something dark." "I know, honey. Listen, if you could go somewhere, even just for a few days, I think it might help." "But I know you don't have anywhere to go," Jessica replied sympathetically. "No, I don't. And that's the problem. I don't know what to do, Jess. Don't worry. I've got some time off next week. I'll head to his hometown and see if I can dig up anything about him and his family. Maybe that will shed some light on what's going on. Jess, you're amazing. I don't know what I'd do without you. Anything for you, Emily. I'll let you know what I find out." The weekend passed uneventfully, with Michael staying home and acting unusually quiet. It was almost as if he knew Emily was suspicious. She tried to act normal, pretending that everything was fine, but inside, her anxiety grew. Monday finally came, and with it, Emily's apprehension. Jessica was due to arrive around 6 p.m., and they planned to follow Michael if he stayed late at work again. By the time Jessica arrived, Emily was a bundle of nerves. "Ready?" Jessica asked, pulling up outside Emily's apartment. "As ready as I'll ever be," Emily replied, though her hands were shaking. "Don't worry, we'll get to the bottom of this," Jessica reassured her. They drove to Michael's auto shop and parked in a nearby lot hidden from view. They watched as a luxury SUV pulled up outside the shop, and a middle-aged woman and a younger man got out. Emily and Jessica exchanged puzzled looks. The woman didn't seem like a romantic rival. She was older and not particularly glamorous. "What do you think?" Jessica asked. "I have no idea," Emily admitted. "This doesn't look like a lover's rendezvous. I'm going to go in," Jessica decided suddenly. "Pretend I have car trouble and see if I can find out what's going on." Emily waited anxiously as Jessica entered the shop. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours. When Jessica finally emerged, she was accompanied by Michael, who seemed annoyed by her presence. They exchanged a few words before Jessica got into her car and drove back to where Emily was waiting. "Well," Emily asked the moment Jessica got in. "This is big," Jessica said, her voice low. "Emily, they were talking about cars with stolen VNs, cars that Michael was supposed to have fixed by now." That woman was furious with him, and he was terrified of her. Emily's blood ran cold. "What do we do?" "We need to be careful, Emily. This is serious. If they get caught, Michael could go to prison. We need to figure out our next move." Overwhelmed by the revelation, Emily tried to process what she had just learned. This doesn't make any sense. I never imagined he'd be involved in something like this. Neither did I, Jessica said, shaking her head. We need to stay calm and figure out our next steps. I'm going to his hometown this weekend, and I'll see what else I can find out. In the meantime, try to act normal around him. I'll do my best, Emily agreed, though she wasn't sure how she'd manage. The days passed in a blur, with Emily doing her best to maintain a facade of normalcy. But every time she looked at Michael, she saw the man Jessica had described, and it terrified her. When Saturday finally arrived, she felt a mixture of dread and relief. Jessica called from the airport. I'm here. I'll call you as soon as I have something. Be careful, Jess. You too, Emily. Hours passed as Emily anxiously awaited Jessica's call. Finally, late in the evening, her phone rang. Jessica's voice was tense. I'm back. Meet me at the hotel. You won't believe what I found out. Emily met Jessica at the hotel, where I was waiting as well. Jessica didn't waste time with pleasantries. Emily, I found out some serious stuff. Michael's mother and brother have been on the run for years. They're wanted by the authorities, and Michael wasn't as clean-cut as he seemed either. He's been involved in some shady deals, though it looks like he tried to start fresh with you. Emily felt a pang of pity for Michael. He wasn't like this when we got married. He was different, calmer. Something must have changed. It did, Jessica confirmed. I think his mother and brother found him and pulled him back into their mess. That's why he's been acting so strange. What do we do now? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Jessica and I exchanged glances. You need to confront him, Emily. But be careful. We'll be here just in case. Emily nodded, though her heart was pounding in her chest. She dialed Michael's number. Hello. His voice was guarded. Michael, we need to talk. Can you come to the hotel? I can't right now. I'm busy. Michael, this is important. It's about your mother. There was a long pause. I'll be there in half an hour. When Michael arrived, Jessica and I hid in the adjoining room. Emily braced herself for what was to come. What's going on? Michael demanded the moment he stepped into the room. Sit down, Michael. We need to talk, Emily said, keeping her voice steady. Michael's eyes narrowed. What do you know? I know everything, Michael. About your mother, your brother, the stolen cars, all of it. Michael's face went pale. How? It doesn't matter how. What matters is that you need to make a choice. Either you go to the police and turn yourself in, or I will. Michael's anger flared. You think you can threaten me? You think you can scare me? I'm not scared of you anymore, Michael. I'm giving you a way out. But if you don't take it, I'll make sure the authorities know everything. Michael lunged at Emily, but I was faster. I stepped in between them, grabbing Michael and shoving him against the wall. Bad move, Michael. You just blew your last chance. Michael struggled, but he knew he was beaten. You set me up. He hissed at Emily. I gave you a choice, Michael. You made the wrong one. Jessica stepped out of the other room, holding up her phone. Everything's recorded, Michael. It's over. Michael slumped in defeat. He knew there was no way out. What now? He asked bitterly. Now you face the consequences, Emily said, her voice steady. Michael was arrested later that night, his life unraveling in front of him. Emily watched as he was led away, a mix of emotions swirling inside her, relief, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of finality. Later, as Emily and I stood on the hotel balcony, looking out at the stars, she sighed. It's amazing how quickly everything can change. Sometimes it's for the best, I said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I suppose, she murmured, but it's still hard to believe that the man I loved for 5 years was capable of all this. You gave him a choice, Emily. He made his decision. Now it's time for you to move on. Emily nodded, feeling a sense of closure. She had done what she needed to do, and now she was ready to start a new chapter in her life, one free of lies and deception.